Let's talk about mushrooms still. I mean, we're talking about mushrooms.
Mushrooms are great.
So someone in my Discord sent me this, and thought this was really cool. Long before trees overtook the land, Earth was covered by giant mushrooms, 24 feet tall, 3 feet wide. These giant spores dotted the ancient landscape, and this is someone who I guess is standing in front of what would be considered an ancient, fossilized mushroom.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. From around 420 to 350, I had to say it that way.
Good job.
350 million years ago, when land plants were still relatively new kids on the evolutionary block, and the tallest trees stood just a few feet high, giant spires of life poked from the earth. The ancient organism boasted trunks of up to 24 feet, 8 meters high, and as wide as 3 feet. The National Geographic in 2007 said that. With the help of fossil dug up in the Saudi Arabia, scientists finally figured out what the giant creature was. A fungus. Of course, they say we think it was a fungus. The towering fungus spires would have stood out against the landscape scarce of such giants. This is a quote from this is from Boyce, I guess is this, who said this? Let's see. A 6-meter fungus would be odd enough in the modern world, but at least we are used to trees being quite bigger. Plants at the time were a few feet tall, invertebrate animals were small, and there were no terrestrial vertebrates. This fossil would have been all the more striking in such a diminutive landscape. Fossils of the organisms known as prototaxids had peppered the paleontological findings of the past century and a half, ever since they were first discovered by Canadians, or by a Canadian in 1859. But despite the fossil records, no one could figure out what the heck these giant spires were. And this is from the University of Chicago.
Wow.
For the next 130 years, debate raged. Some scientists called prototaxids a lichen, others a fungus, and others still clung to the notion that it was some kind of tree. The problem is that when you look it up closely at the anatomy, it's evocative of a lot of different things, and it's diagnostic of nothing, says Boyce, an associate professor in geophysical sciences and the Committee of Evolutionary Biology. And it's so damn big that whatever someone says it's something, everyone else hackles. Get up. How could you have a lichen 20 feet tall? And all I can think about is this man.
Yeah.
This is Dr. Robotnik. This is Jim Carrey. And he was basically banished at the end of Sonic.
What a mustache.
But this is the world that he was in. I mean, it is actually really beautiful.
Well, you also have to imagine these things don't breathe out oxygen, right?
No.
So, I mean, assuming that there are Apisthoconta. So that's another thing about prototepids, is that theoretically, and this is why people say fungus, is because the family in the metazoa that connects Animalius to fungus is so broad that it's probably one of those.
Yeah.
But what it would mean is that they don't breathe out oxygen. They breathe in oxygen. So it would really suck to walk through that forest because it would just be CO2 gas coming out of them all the time.
Interesting.
And so it really, like the feedback loop of what happened when Apisthoconta went onto land and started breaking up the rock to make soil. I mean, eventually you have to produce, because they needed to eat oxygen. Something has to be producing more oxygen. So it brings land plants out from sea plants as well.
They're like, ooh, we like this CO2,
Yeah.
and probably caused the trees that were only a few feet high to take in that CO2. Because I just did a study. I read about a study that there's a huge increase in the fauna on this planet. 17%.
It's
more.
almost like fauna likes eating CO2.
Yeah.
Weird.
I know, right? So actually, mushrooms and fauna are a really good pair together.
But what you
they feed off each other.
What you just said would have gotten you burned at the stake at some point, right? This idea, and laughed at, surely, up until 20 years ago in Santa Cruz when they started kind of opening up to this idea. But they didn't like the idea that there's a conscious entity that was gardening. I mean, somehow we're okay with beavers making dams.
Yeah.
Somehow we're okay with a lot of the things animals do. But this freaks people out because this is so close to an animal. But it's like
Mushrooms.
Mushrooms are conscious. They use the
And,
same
and
hormones as us.
mushrooms are different than anything else on this planet, aren't they?
Absolutely.
They're really different.
But they're really similar to animalias. That's why the animals and plants, like mushrooms, Opisthokonta, are made up of animals and mushrooms. They're closer related to each other than they are to plants. Both of us are foreign to plants because they have no cell walls. What we have, though, that's separate from mushrooms is we have a social political body where the brain is in one place in a hierarchy. Right?
Okay.
And this is because you have single-celled organisms that become a string, then the string becomes like a necklace that opens up into a bay, and the bay can bring in food, but then eventually they also create teeth, and then they have a digestive tract. Like, we'll just deal with thinking. We'll be the brain. You be the digestive tract. Mushrooms don't do this. Mushrooms have internodal systems of lung stem, brain stem, stomach, digestive tract, everywhere.
Everything is everything.
Living meatball. Yeah,
Yeah.
but not everything is everything. There's still some specialization. It's just that it's everywhere at once, and you get to pick what you do.
Interesting.
The more everything is everything, also, you look at the siphonophoric jellyfish, also follows the same model. It can be broken up into 1,000 different jellyfish, but it's one kind of living organism. So
What kind of jellyfish?
siphonophoric.
Siphonophoric.
Yeah, it's
Never heard of it.
You've got a picture of one on your wall, actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that
Yeah,
kind, yeah.
Right.
But the thing about the mushroom, though, is that it can grow with one cell wall thick to have all of these different parts. So these mushrooms you're saying that are 24 feet tall, that's nothing compared to what we think some of these giant Opisthokonta were. Like some of these mesas, right? And in Scotland, there's these weird stones that come out of the ground like perfect tubes, and these resonant geological patterns. We think we're probably Opisthokonta at some point, or somehow forced out by mushrooms that were growing them. So in the mesas that look like giant silicon trees, this is a big internet thing, is silicon trees. A lot of the silicon trees were actually prototopids.
Interesting. What about the idea that ancient human beings ate mushrooms?
Oh, clearly.
And became enlightened.
Well, the fact that they have the same neural hormones as us, it seems like, again, it's a foregone conclusion that we were using them for a very long time. We can go back to the Neanderthals carrying a skull with fire in it, and they have ritual taboos where they're using mushrooms.
Yeah.
How far back beyond that you want to go? Paul Stamets is probably the best. He's got a book on the use of psychogenesis in mushrooms. And then also Terence McKenna. Like, this is their field, this idea of mushrooms affecting human consciousness. I'm for it, frankly, because it makes the most sense. If you start to intake specific neural hormones, that it'll change your perceptions. My theory, which is like based on the hypothesis of Shulgin, Alexander Shulgin, which was essentially that we have hooks and loops in our system. We have doors without the keys, and the plants a lot of the time in nature are the keys to open these doors. And the reason biologically is if you went around thinking this way all the time, you would get eaten by a tiger, right? But if you have the safety net that sometimes you want to think outside the box, or you want to connect with a specific forest, like you're in that Avatar movie, that moment, then you can open the door and close the door again.
Well, don't we have like receptors in our brain that are designed specifically to like connect with THC?
Right, cannabinoids, right?
Cannabinoids,
for instance.
Right, but we're one of the few mammals on this planet that have those receptors in our brains.
Weird, right?
Yeah, it is weird.
Comes back to that whole we're being engineered by insects from space.
Something,
future.
or mushrooms.
Yeah, which is the main thing, I think, is that we're kind of these umbilical spelunking scuba divers attached on yo-yo strings to the mushroom homeostasis cathedral.
Jeez.
And the mushroom is aware of this for a long time.
Yeah.
You know how redwood trees have root systems that can connect old redwoods with young redwoods? So the memories in the root structure, they can actually, they've done tests, it can feel when a redwood gets cut down miles away because of the nervous system.
I didn't know that. That's pretty amazing.
Mushrooms
But
have the same
that reminds me of this mushroom that you were talking about. This giant mushroom is the largest organism ever.
For example,
this is right now. This was written in 2019. I'm assuming this thing is still alive.
Yeah, but there are more giant mushrooms that we're not even fully able to measure because of how big they are.
Really?
Yeah.
So something bigger than this.
Oh yeah, easily.
So just letting you guys know, this is humongous fungus, a colony of fungal clones that stretches over 2,385 acres. That's like 3.6 square miles.
All one cell wall thick. I mean, come on. mushrooms everywhere.
That is one colony of
Yeah.
mushrooms that big right now. And that's what we know about,
right.
right?
Yeah, I mean, there's funguses that are less visually aesthetic. That don't have giant fleshy, caps that grow.
Yeah.
That are just like mold or like fungus. And there's even some of this that exists in parts of our atmosphere. It looks like there's something that's living in the atmosphere that's a mycelial based network as well.
Yeah.
So they're all over the place. There are giant, and it can feel somewhere. I mean, 1 square foot. When you step down in that forest, you're going to cover 5 to 10 miles of mycelial network that connects all these things.
It's pretty amazing.
So it's really all the mycelium in the ground that's where the
It
nervous
reminds
system
me,
is.
you brought up Avatar in a second, and
Yeah.
you were talking about tripping in the forest, connecting to the planet, but then she does that test, and she's like, there's more neurons in this that connect. It's more than the human brain. It's like everything's connected to everything. It's like, maybe, I mean, all living things have DMT in it on this planet. Like, we're all connected with at least that.
Right.
And that's pretty incredible to think about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So, I mean,
that's
this
pretty
idea
incredible.
of collective consciousness seems pretty real. And, also looking at how mushrooms connect all of these different species, like the fact that they're creating these environments where there's redwood trees and then there's, animals that live in there. There's a bird that picks up a fish that drops it into a mud pond on the 200-foot level of the redwood tree. So there's fish living in ponds and trees. Like, all of this is decided by something, and it's actually being engineered in a lot of ways by this giant mushroom.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
I like it.